Welcome back to Rowdy Rants. I'm Rowdy. Thank you for coming. Talking about the nanny state, because it's here. We now have a nanny state, and probably in a lot more ways than most people realize. So I'm just kind of wondering how folks are liking it, because now we're being told what, when, how, and why. Come January the 4th, anybody that has a job with a company that has 100 or more people has to be vaccinated, or they have to be tested once a week, quite possibly out of their own pocket. A lot of employers are not going to want to foot that bill. So how do you like your nanny state so far there? Okay. Now, vaccines are fine, whatever. But vaccines should be a public service message sort of thing, with medical experts on, public announcements. But you see what's happened is it's become a government issue. The government has stepped in between the medical establishment and the people, in my opinion. And what we have is sometimes mixed messaging, or even instances where the government is coming out with messaging before the medical establishment, possibly confusing people into thinking that the government is setting expectations for the messaging coming from the medical establishment. Once again, nanny state. The government is taking care of the people in the eyes of those in control of government. Whereas people that are against this sort of thing see it as government overreach, or worse. Just watch the news. You see all varieties of opinions. And it seems like pretty much nobody's happy. Because now government is dictating medical advice when it comes to the vaccine. And that medical advice is get vaccinated, or else. See, they've added the or else. That's where the nanny state actually comes in. They're setting an arrangement where your employment is in jeopardy. They're also setting expectations. That's not the medical establishment doing that, which is the biggest reason why we need to take people like Fauci and government out of the picture and leave it with the medical establishment. The messaging would be more clear, and people will be more likely to listen than they're going to be to a bureaucrat that spent 30 years concerned with funding as well as other aspects, or a politician that's trying to keep their group happy. And nanny state doesn't stop there. Okay, you have tens of thousands of immigrants coming across the southern border and being released into the United States, or the gotaways that are just never even contacted. And we have an administration that is talking about rewarding the ones who were turned away by President Trump's administration with an outlay of cash. I believe the size was up to $450,000 each. So you're talking about making immigrants millionaires, people who came here illegally. Okay, once again, we're back into the nanny state. Well, Rowdy, how is it nanny state when it's an illegal? Okay, that is also a future loyal voter. Nanny state. Here we go again. It's all nanny state. And that's why we have the clauses in government of separation of state, and federal government. And that's why the federal government isn't supposed to be intervening in state business without a good reason. Also, a lot of people, they can't help but see that our day-to-day life is being changed by fiat in a lot of ways, and that's an opinion. When you have a president issuing an executive order to a federal group that is fairly innocuous, OSHA, and having OSHA draft and issue an order, an emergency authorization, or I'm sorry, an emergency order, or dictate or mandate, whatever you want to call it, to be vaccinated through the businesses. At the same time, the president is dictating that anybody basically associated with the federal government must be vaccinated. Nanny State again, dictating the standards instead of the medical establishment. And the medical establishment, see, they have the authority and they have the credibility to reach out to people and talk to them. And if the background noise would just die down, the people would probably be able to hear what the medical establishment has to say. But you can't keep the opinionated mainstream media out of it. They've got to throw in their 2 cents worth. And most of the time it's hate that they're throwing in. It's just creating a continuing mess. Now, a lot of things that I'm talking about are pretty clearly on the Democrat side of the aisle, but now the GOP is getting away with it too by their silence. Because now the GOP does get a great deal of donations from corporate donors that want cheap labor. So you might notice that the GOP is talking about the immigrants coming across the border and the drug situation and the crime situation and the fact that they're breaking the law just coming into the country. But what you'll never hear the GOP saying, short of cornering them, is that they are lowering the standard of living when they're pumping cheap labor into this country, which also causes low-cost housing to get taken up much more quickly. Therefore, the cost of housing goes up. And all of these things do affect entry-level workers coming out of school and low-income Americans. And nobody cares a whit for it. Tough luck. The answer that the Democrats seem to have is pump more money out, pump more money out, pump more money out. We can end inflation by pumping more money out. Pumping more money out just happened to occur preceding this bullet of inflation. But people seem to be missing that point. Okay. Further, more Nanny State is this whole voting thing that they got going on with the whole voter ID. You've got Democrats in D.C. wanting to dictate voting standards nationwide when that is specifically the business of the state. The people in the state actually have elected officials that are there to maintain the state, operate the state in a manner that they were elected to do. And the government, the federal government, is overriding that. They are overriding the voters. A lot of people think, well, that's a state versus federal thing. No, that's a voter thing. The voters put that state government there to take care of them and their state. And the state's powers are being usurped. nanny state. It's all over. Practically everything that you're seeing as far as changes go are nanny state. They are grabbing more and more power as they go. And they're not doing it with the permission of the people. You can say, well, they were elected and President Biden's in power, so they're enacting his agenda. His agenda within the realm of federal government, yes. But his reach does not abolish the power of the state. That's just like school closures and lockdowns. When this is dictated from the state level, it ignores a lot. Because you have a lot of areas that, quite frankly, don't need it. But you have statewide dictates dictating these things throughout the state. People would be more comfortable if this was happening at a local level. And I don't necessarily mean at a township level, and bring it down to a county level. That's the next step down from state. The people that are there. Health departments can ascertain if the COVID levels are too high in an area and make these suggestions for specific areas. These ideas that the state can dictate better as far as something like that goes, they're harebrained. The state may need to enact such regulations on major cities where you have huge municipalities that they need to lock down, or they need to close schools or modify school hours and student attendance. And these are things that make sense. You could do it on a state level for specific areas. But they need to do this like a surgeon with a scalpel, not a swordsman with a battle axe. You cut the cancer out. You don't kill the victim or the patient. You don't turn the patient into a victim. They need to think this through a little more clearly. They need to have the people's support. And you achieve that at a local level. With these dictates coming out broad-based, that doesn't help for areas that don't have the same problem. You can have high numbers in COVID in a large municipality, and smaller municipalities around it have no high numbers at all, simply because they are geographically differentiated and isolated from the larger municipality. So these things need to be thought out better. But once again, this is more nanny state. This is government overreach, in my opinion. That's pretty much it. I'm not going to drag it out any further. There's a lot more that you can go into if you stop and think about it. If you're watching and you feel strongly about it, you really should be contacting your House representative and your governor and your senators, and let them know what you feel like should be happening. Because until people start exercising their voice enough so that it distracts these politicians that are basically set apart from the rest of us, nothing will change. And the nanny state will continue to grow. And soon it'll be to the point that we cannot wrest that power back from the nanny state. Because power is something people never want to give up. because they know best. They're the ones that took the power upon themselves. That's the general line of thinking. It's always that same general line of thinking. You have to get in contact with your representatives in government, state and federal, and let them know. That's it. My name's Rowdy. You've heard my rants. Feel free to comment below. Subscribe if you would please. You have a nice day.